You're laid out by Nick Payton-Walsh there. Thank you for that reporting. The question remains, can U.S. President Donald Trump accomplish a seemingly impossible task, achieve lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine? The White House says President Trump intends to meet face-to-face with his Ukrainian and Russian counterparts as early as next week. While a major sit-down like that would normally take more time to plan, officials note the U.S. president is urging his team to move fast. Russian President Vladimir Putin also says he's open to meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky if certain conditions are met. My next guest is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Charles Kupchan joins us now from Washington. Thank you for taking the time. Even in the possibility of this meeting, we're already seeing a few mixed signals. The Kremlin saying it could happen as soon as next week with preparations underway. Sources tell CNN President Trump told European leaders he intends to meet with both Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia now appears to be saying certain conditions must be met if that were to happen. What is top of mind for you when it comes to a potential meeting between these two or three leaders that needs to immediately get done if this becomes a reality?
Well, those sort of mixed signals and the confusion about what's going on here is par for the course. Because from the very beginning, I would give Trump credit for reaching out to Putin, to trying to end a war that Ukraine won't win. But there hasn't been a real strategy from the get-go. And so far, we've had 5 phone calls between Putin and Trump. We've had multiple visits of Witkoff to the Kremlin. We'd have meetings between Russian officials and American officials in the Middle East. What do we have to show for it? Nothing. The Russians have yet to demonstrate that they're negotiating in good faith on a nightly basis. They launch drones and missiles against Ukraine. So I'm hoping that in the visit that took place a few days ago of Witkoff with Mr. Putin, Witkoff made some progress. Witkoff has some reason to believe that if Trump sits down with Putin, the Russians will be ready to compromise. But we don't yet have an indication that that's the case. Both sides need to do more homework before this kind of meeting can be productive.
And this was Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's 5th time visiting Russia this year, this most recently meeting with Putin. I guess at a basic level, is there anything substantial you expect a Trump-Putin meeting or a Trump-Putin-Zelensky meeting at that high-level principal level would be able to get done that Witkoff's visits to this point might not have been able to?
Well, I think Trump has to be very careful about giving Putin a meeting with the American president. That is a big win for Putin. In many respects, one of the things that Trump can give Putin is sitting at the table with the big boys, coming back in from the cold, rehabilitation of sorts. And to give Putin that kind of reward, you have to have Putin ready to pay a high price. And I'm really looking at one issue that has yet to be clarified. The ceasefire in place makes sense. Russia holding on to the 20% of Ukraine that it occupies makes sense because Ukraine doesn't have the military capability to kick them out. But what about that 80% of Ukraine that is still Ukraine? Is Putin ready to accept a Ukraine that is free, that is sovereign, that is independent, that is secure? If he's not ready for that outcome, and he thinks he can keep his thumb on Kyiv and install in Kyiv a pro-Russian regime, we're not even close to getting a deal. And so far, we just haven't seen signs that Putin is ready to walk back from the maximalist war aims of pulling Ukraine back into Russia's sphere of influence.
And that, of course, has been one issue that has been really the stalemate, as Ukraine has said that giving up that territory is a non-starter. At what point will that dynamic change, potentially in the context of a talk like this? I want to bring up secondary tariffs because obviously President Trump has imposed steep tariffs on a number of countries, but India, already facing a new 25% tariff in effect today, is being threatened with another 25% later this month as punishment for importing Russian oil and gas. U.S. sanctions or penalties directly on Russia, pretty common at this point, not something that is unusual for them. But do you think punishing their trading partners will actually have any substantial impact?
No, I think it's a mistake. And we've already seen Prime Minister Modi push back. Now there's talk of a meeting between Modi and potentially the Chinese head and potentially Mr. Putin. So it's in some ways pushing the Indians away from us. You're getting the same thing from Brazil, where Trump has imposed 50% tariffs, and the Brazilians are now sort of siding with the Indians and the Chinese and the Russians. So, yeah, I understand the impulse to try to strangle the Russian economy, but we're pushing democracies away from the United States. And frankly, I don't think this is going to work. The weakest link in American policy has been the sanctions. And that's because the Russians have other countries that will buy their oil, that will trade with them. In the end of the day, it's going to take American and European weapons flowing to Ukraine, giving Ukraine what it needs to block Putin, to get Putin to stop. I think Putin will stop when he is stopped by military force.
And you talked about one of the risks of President Trump securing a meeting with Putin, bringing him back in from the cold, so to speak. One of the things that's upset President Trump is that he felt at points in this war that he could trust Putin, that he wanted peace here, and got visibly upset when Russia continued to strike Ukrainian cities through drone and missile strikes. How do you get around that dynamic and believe him now when the president clearly believed Putin months ago?
Yeah, I have to say I'm a bit surprised by this announcement of a face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin. Because if you look at Trump's direction of travel over the last 4 to 6 weeks, it's clearly away from Putin. I think Trump felt played by Putin, and he was played by Putin. They'd have nice conversations. Trump would put down the phone, Putin would put down the phone, and he'd launch weapons, 600 drones against Ukraine. And Trump finally said, hey, I'm being played for the fool here. And then he pivoted and he said, sanctions on Russia. I'm going to stand by my friends in Europe. I'm going to sell more weapons to Ukraine via Europe. And now all of a sudden he seems to be pivoting back. It's classic Trump, right? He blows with the wind. But hopefully this is a meeting that is going to be well prepared, because he has to exact concessions from Putin. Otherwise, I think Putin is just going to keep taking these conversations to the bank and keep going after victory in Ukraine.
Quoting President Trump out of a cabinet meeting on Putin, he's very nice all of the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. We will see if that changes, if this meeting becomes any sort of reality. Charles Kupchan, appreciate you being here.
Good to be with you.
All right, still to come tonight, a worsening public health crisis in Sudan as war and mass displacement drive a surge in cholera. I'll speak with an operations and advocacy director for the United Nations who's on the ground. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to One World. I'm Paula Newton in New York. More now on our top story. Israel's prime minister says he intends to take military control of all of Gaza. Right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with his security cabinet to present this plan. Earlier, he spoke with Fox News and said the aim is to root out Hamas before handing the territory to a civilian government that is not Hamas. Many inside Israel are warning, though, that this move is not a good idea and would displace Palestinians yet again. Sources say Israel's military chief believes it would trap Israeli forces and endanger the lives of hostages. Now, while the Kremlin and the White House hash out details for the meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Russia is trying to cut off her son on the battlefield. It's the only regional Ukrainian capital initially occupied by Russia, but later liberated by Ukraine. Russian troops are still bombarding the city, and as Nick Payton-Walsh reports, they have new goals.
Russia is moving to cut off and cut up the city of Kherson, claiming its drones would hit all cars on this road into a city occupied from above, where Russian attack drones haunt your every move.
Incredible damage being done to the city. Clearly, Russia trying to force normal life. Drones circulating around ordinary people trying to live here.
But this weekend, the occupier went further still, moving to split the city in two, trying to cut off its southern island, still home to about 2,000 people, by blowing the bridge. Drone footage caught the moment, but it was only partially successful. shredding nerves as much as concrete, and sparking a sudden evacuation effort, during which, oddly, the Russians seem to be letting hundreds of civilians out.
And there seems to be some kind of pause in drone activity, from what we can make out, enabling some of these evacuations.
Когда це вже все закончиться? Я даже не ожидала. Що ми вже одуріли від цього всього. Коли вони ума наберуться, і оце зробили таке страхолюдіння, щоб повбивали все, не за мира було, га? Коли приїде Трамп чи хто, щоб уже ми такої старості не заслужили, які нам зробили отут.
They lived alone with almost nothing.
Treated at a makeshift clinic in the town of Tawila in North Darfur. Now, the country is in the throes of its rainy season, which is contributing to the outbreak, in tandem with poor living conditions and a lack of sanitation. The conflict between the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF as they're known, and the Sudanese army broke out in April 2023 when the former allies clashed over plans to integrate their troops. Since then, more than 12 million people have been forced to flee. That includes at least 7 million people who are internally displaced, as well as others who have sought refuge in neighboring countries. The International Criminal Court has said it believes war crimes and crimes against humanity are happening in Sudan's Darfur region. I want to bring in Idem Wosorno. She is the Operations and Advocacy Director at the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. She's on the ground in Sudan right now. Thank you for taking the time. Can you just describe for our audience what you have witnessed on the ground in Sudan?
Thank you so much, and thank you to CNN for having me on this session and for highlighting the plight of the people of Sudan. You've highlighted some of the numbers, but let me share what I saw firsthand in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Our first visit as the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs since we had to leave the capital at the start of the conflict, April 2023. I lived in Sudan. I was there for 3 years in Khartoum, in Darfur, in the east, in Kassala, and various locations, and I returned to a ghost town, a ghost city, a city utterly decimated, devastated, destroyed, looted, burned. What we see on the screens does not describe the horrors. Myself and my colleagues, our Sudanese colleagues, some from Omdurman, some from Khartoum, saw this firsthand, their homes destroyed. We were also able to drive, when we're moving around to meetings, to our office. The UN offices across the city burnt, looted, and I saw our office completely devastated. A car seat in the grass somewhere, a mug, a complete destruction of United Nations property, of civilian assets. We couldn't get into the building because it had not been cleared yet by the United Nations Mine Action Service, who have gone office to office clearing these offices of unexploded ordnances, remnants of war. I heard harrowing stories from the colleagues who had stayed. I also was able to speak to our heroic Sudanese health workers, Sudanese humanitarian workers who stayed through the crisis and those who returned as soon as they could. I spoke to health workers, humanitarian workers who had been themselves displaced several times, at least 7 times by one NGO worker, and at least 5 times by one colleague from the United Nations. I saw things that I never imagined I would see. And let's not forget, Khartoum was a buzzing city. This is a place we all knew. The Hilton Hotel burned to a crisp. This is where we went to have a bit of respite, those of us who were coming from Darfur 20 years ago. Sudan is not what it is today. I'm celebrating the humanitarian workers with a smile on my face because I am humbled by what I saw, what they were able to do. You talked about cholera. We were able to visit a Save the Children and local NGO center, working with the Ministry of Health at the height of the cholera response. They were seeing 350 patients a day. And 2 days ago, when I was in Khartoum, in Omdurman, there was 1 patient left. They were able to save over 3,500 lives, 62 lost to cholera. Let's not forget some of these fled the crisis, went back home. Part of the 1.3 million people who've returned and succumbed to cholera because of what you mentioned earlier, lack of basic services.
And Idem, I don't want to cut you off there, but I just want to ask you because, one recent article in The Atlantic called this the most nihilistic conflict on Earth. And we talked about some of the eye-opening statistics. You mentioned some of them. Millions have been displaced by years of fighting, more than Ukraine and Gaza combined. About 14 million people have been displaced. Over 100,000 people have died, likely a significant undercounting there. And by the World Food Program estimates, nearly half of the 25 million people expected to go hungry this year. Do you believe the world is paying enough attention to what's happening in Sudan?
Thank you for that question. I'm grateful for CNN to air this, but I don't think so. I've been doing this for almost a quarter of a century, 24 years with the United Nations humanitarian arm, and I have not seen a conflict so neglected. If you are watching the news today, Sudan needs your help. The Sudanese people, the generous people of Sudan, the average man and woman, the child needs your help and needs your attention. But the answer is no. I think a lot more can be done. If I may, you talked about World Food Program's ability to reach people. They've reached millions of people with food aid when they have access. We have convoys and trucks, UNICEF, WFP, International Organization for Migration, United Nations Population Fund, and NGO trucks waiting outside the besieged El Fasher to try and get in to assist people. You talked about famine. Zamzam camp has famine conditions, and you saw the media yesterday, a year of declaration of famine. The world is not paying enough attention to Sudan. The people of Sudan deserve a lot. Let's not forget Sudan produced doctors, surgeons, teachers, lawyers. Sudan, Khartoum University, Omdurman University, full of students with hope. Today, we saw some returning when I was in Khartoum, but Sudan needs the world's attention. Thank you so much for spotlighting Sudan in this episode.
And Sudan has produced people like yourself who have come back to try and help the population currently experiencing unimaginable situations right now. Adim Wasorno, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Much more to come after the break.
And welcome back to One World. I'm Paula Newton in New York. More now on our top story. Israel's prime minister says he intends to take military control of all of Gaza. Right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with his security cabinet to present this plan. Earlier, he spoke with Fox News and said the aim is to root out Hamas before handing the territory to a civilian government that is not Hamas. Many inside Israel are warning, though, that this move is not a good idea and would displace Palestinians yet again. Sources say Israel's military chief believes it would trap Israeli forces and endanger the lives of hostages. Now, while the Kremlin and the White House hash out details for the meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Russia is trying to cut off her son on the battlefield. It's the only regional Ukrainian capital initially occupied by Russia, but later liberated by Ukraine. Russian troops are still bombarding the city, and as Nick Payton-Walsh reports, they have new goals.
Russia is moving to cut off and cut up the city of Kherson, claiming its drones would hit all cars on this road into a city occupied from above, where Russian attack drones haunt your every move.
Incredible damage being done to the city. Clearly, Russia trying to force normal life. Drones circulating around ordinary people trying to live here.
But this weekend, the occupier went further still, moving to split the city in two, trying to cut off its southern island, still home to about 2,000 people, by blowing the bridge. Drone footage caught the moment, but it was only partially successful, shredding nerves as much as concrete, and sparking a sudden evacuation effort, during which, oddly, the Russians seemed to be letting hundreds of civilians out.
And there seems to be some kind of pause in drone activity, from what we can make out, enabling some of these evacuations.
Ну, конечно. Если так, что сразу, когда це вже все закончиться.
Я даже не ожидала.
Що ми вже одуріли от цього всього. Коли вони ума наберуться, і оце зробили отаке страхолюдіння, щоб повбивали все, нельзя мира було, га? Коли приїде Трамп чи хто, щоб уже ми такої старості.
Might have more dance moves than you. These lively parrots are known for getting down, dancing around. Look at that head bob. That's some serious stuff. And through social media, look, I can see where they're learning it from. Social media researchers decided to take a closer look. They actually identified 30 distinct dance moves by cockatoos, 17 of which had not been described scientifically before. How can you scientifically describe rhythm like that? The birds are known to dance to music in captivity, but we still don't know why outside of just catching a beat every once in a while. The one you're seeing now, dancing to Lady Gaga and Tommy Two-Tone, in case you're wondering, but honestly, we'd be doing the exact same thing. And finally, tonight, the Latino musician, the first Latino musician, as we talk about music and as we talk about honoring people in this genre, the first Latino musician to win a Grammy has passed away. Eddie Palmieri was known as an innovative musician in rumba and Latin jazz. Cockatoos would likely be dancing to the music that he brought so many people for decades. Born in New York's Spanish Harlem, he went on to become a pianist, composer, and band leader. He was the first Latino to win a Grammy in 1975 and would go on to win 7 more. In 2005, he became the host of Caliente on National Public Radio. His daughter told the New York Times he died in New Jersey after an extended illness. And thank you all for watching tonight. Stay with CNN. A lot of news to cover. What We Know with Max Foster. Up next.
And welcome back to One World. I'm Paula Newton in New York. More now on our top story. Israel's prime minister says he intends to take military control of all of Gaza. Right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with his security cabinet to present this plan. Earlier, he spoke with Fox News and said the aim is to root out Hamas before handing the territory to a civilian government that is not Hamas. Many inside Israel are warning, though, that this move is not a good idea and would displace Palestinians yet again. Sources say Israel's military chief believes it would trap Israeli forces and endanger the lives of hostages. Now, while the Kremlin and the White House hash out details for the meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Russia is trying to cut off her son on the battlefield. It's the only regional Ukrainian capital initially occupied by Russia, but later liberated by Ukraine. Russian troops are still bombarding the city, and as Nick Payton-Walsh reports, they have new goals.
Russia is moving to cut off and cut up the city of Kherson, claiming its drones would hit all cars on this road into a city occupied from above, where Russian attack drones haunt your every move.
Incredible damage being done to the city. Clearly, Russia trying to force normal life. Drones circulating around ordinary people trying to live here.
But this weekend, the occupier went further still, moving to split the city in two, trying to cut off its southern island, still home to about 2,000 people, by blowing the bridge. Drone footage caught the moment, but it was only partially successful, shredding nerves as much as concrete, and sparking a sudden evacuation effort, during which, oddly, the Russians seemed to be letting hundreds of civilians out.
And there seems to be some kind of pause in drone activity, from what we can make out, enabling some of these evacuations.
Ну, конечно. Если так, что сразу, когда це вже все закончиться.
Я даже не ожидала.
Що ми вже одуріли от цього всього. Коли вони ума наберуться, і оце зробили отаке страхолюдіння, щоб повбивали все, нельзя мира було, га? Коли приїде Трамп чи хто, щоб уже ми такої старості не заслужили, які нам зробили отут.
They lived alone with almost nothing, so have even less to go to.
Ну,
Я вже так устала від цієї стрільби, що мені вже нерви не видержують. Я бачила цю всю кінегу до Зеленського. Меня вже посели туди їхати. Я ж на одній ногі на костелі.
925 evacuated end Wednesday. But don't try suggesting here this is Russian mercy.
Їм абсолютно байдуже, які це цілі, тому говорити про якусь людяність з точки зору росіян тут абсолютно недоцільно.
Russian drone operators post images of their hunting people in the city. The gaudy music, as if it is sport. Wherever we go, anxiety, our cameras might reveal locations to the Russians, especially at this hospital. 3 injured from drones and shelling already, and 2 more once we leave.
Добрый день, уважаемый.
Oleg, 62, ran outside to help after one drone blast, but was hit by a second.
А ну ни хера летит еще один, и незаметно оттуда он взял. Падаю, там у меня идут эти, скаты такие вдоль забора. Я за них падаю, а ноги, если прямо вот перебросил бы, а так ноги там остались.
But will the Ukrainian president attend? This is what we know. The long-anticipated in-person meeting between US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin could happen next week. Mr. Putin said today during a meeting with the Emirati president that he has nothing against the idea of Mr. Zelensky attending if certain conditions are met, though. He also confirmed he would likely meet with President Trump next week and that the UAE could be where the talks take place.
We have many friends who are ready to help us organize events of this kind. One of our friends is the President of the United Arab Emirates. I think we will decide, but this would be one of the quite suitable places.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he should be involved in any talks.
Everyone knows that key decisions in Russia are made by one person, and that this person is afraid of sanctions from the United States of America, and that it is only fair that Ukraine should be a participant in the negotiations.
Let's go straight to Christian Holmes. It does suggest, doesn't it, hearing from Zelensky there, that he's not currently involved in this meeting that seems to be being teed up next week.
Well, I do want to make one thing clear. There is nothing that has been finalized yet. And anyone that you're talking to at the White House, they're telling you that it's not final until it's final. There are still things that they have to agree on, particularly logistics, setting, what exactly the sit-down would even look like. Would Zelensky be involved? All we know right now for certain is that President Trump, on this call with European leaders, suggested that he would be sitting down or was open to the idea of sitting down with Vladimir Putin as early as next week. When you talk to some of these White House officials, they're a little bit squishy on exactly when that would happen or what that would look like. And that's because there are a lot of logistics and pre-planning that would have to go into this. Now, President Trump in that same call mentioned Zelensky as part of this, saying essentially that he would meet down with Putin and then afterwards would have a trilateral with both of these leaders. But again, one of the things that was interesting is that Trump was asked about this yesterday, and he said that he has been burned by Putin before or let down by Putin before. And that's why you're not seeing the White House really get ahead of this, or even President Trump, because they're going to see how this plays out. And one thing to point to is what you heard from Vladimir Putin there, saying he'd be open to having Zelensky there if certain conditions would be met. When you look at certain conditions being met, that's just part of what has to go on in terms of negotiating between the United States and Russia, and we're just simply not there yet. From everyone I have spoken to, these are preliminary conversations. They're, of course, looking at multiple locations. I've heard the White House has been briefed on this idea of UAE, but there are other places that are still in play. It's still very early. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not working to try and get something on the books. We know President Trump is eager for a meeting with Vladimir Putin. We also know that he's been urging his staff to look into various options, talking to them, asking them questions about what's even possible, how this would look. But again, they are all being pretty careful when it comes to publicly releasing any information about this, because President Trump has now, in a way that he didn't believe the first term, seen himself be burned by Vladimir Putin on multiple fronts, having these lengthy conversations with Putin in which he goes back on his word. So now you're seeing a much cagier Donald Trump when it comes to talking about the Russian president.